I'm gonna build a small woodshed right in this area. Just something that's like a 4x8x8, something that can store like 1.5, maybe 2 cords of wood. Not a whole lot. Just got a lot of woods like you can see right here that got to clean up. Got things like this, bunch of buckthorn got to take out to make room. So clear this out with the brush saw, rake it up, then we can put some pavers down that I'll set the woodshed on top of. So the first thing to do is to lay out the foundation. What I'm going to be doing is putting mine on some paver bricks. I have these bricks left over from the previous owners that they did something with it, just had a pile of them. I think they're like $1 a piece. They're not bad if you want to do it yourself, or you can get actual bricks that are meant for foundations. This is a woodshed. It's not structurally important that it stays in one spot on the ground, so I'm not going to worry about it. But it's important to level it, and you can see I have a board across here. That board that's on edge is actually pretty straight, and so I got this one over here that's not quite high enough, and this one too that's not quite high enough, or I can bring this one down. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this one down, and then this one will probably still have a little bit of a gap, but then that side will touch. And what you can do to level this out, it's easier to bring the dirt down than it is to build it up. And the reason is, if you build it up, it's more likely to sink back down. If you take dirt away and pack it down as hard as you can, it's more likely to stay there and not sink more. So that's why I'd like to take this one, move it down to the level of this one and this one. This one I'm going to keep where it's at. It's already the lowest one. You can see I got 3 bricks underneath it, and then there's 2 under this one, 2 under this one, 1 over here. So this one's the highest side. But right now, what I'm going to do is take this down a little bit, just move some dirt away, pack it down. That'll bring it down hopefully to this level. And then I can figure out what to do with this guy over here. And once everything is level across here, you want to make sure it's level front to back as well on all of these. We'll do the same thing on the back side. I just have more bricks holding up the back side here. And then once that's done, we can box out the bottom of the frame. So now I brought this down a little bit. The shadow makes it hard to tell, but it is touching over there, here, and on this side. So it's just this middle one that we need to bring up. And what I'm going to do to bring it up is actually bring the dirt down and put another brick on there. That way I don't build the dirt up, and like I said, it'll end up sinking down over time. You pack the dirt down, put a brick on, and it won't sink. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about. I put the 3rd brick on there. I moved it down a little bit, but now this is the high side. It's not touching there, and it's not touching over here, so it's resting on this one and that one. Need to bring this down just a little bit, and what it'll do is it'll even out these 3, and it'll stay touching over there. All 4 are touching now. Doesn't look like it because of the shadow on that one, but these are all contacted, same level. But what happened is over here, this board is lifted off of the concrete pad there. So we'll just erase it up by putting another pad underneath it, doing the same thing we did here. We got to level the backside too, so we'll just do it at the same time. This is just an aesthetics thing here, but all of these boards, I wanted them to be flush with the edge board here, and I didn't want the bricks to be protruding. This one, it's right at the edge, and that's fine, but these other ones where I set the bricks and where they aren't in the way of like tree roots and stuff, they're hidden, and that's fine. I just didn't want the bricks to be pushing out, so that way if I wanted to put a nice face board on here and seal this all up, I can, and nothing's in the way. Just testing the level of everything. The only spot that is raised up is this board over here. It actually worked out pretty well that these 3 boards were pretty level with each other, front and back. But on the back side on this one, it's not. So if we raise up the brick on the back side, it'll raise up the middle and that side. And once it touches, then this should be relatively flat. I don't care if it's perfectly flat. This isn't a building. I'm not going to be walking on it. I just need to have it roughly flat so things aren't falling out of it. It's just holding my burn wood. Of course, it doesn't hurt to check the actual level of the boards instead of just eyeing it, but eyeing it works too. Can sometimes help to stand back a little bit, see if it's level as well. This is plenty good for a woodshed. If this was an actual utility shed or something, I'd probably do a little bit more thorough job and make sure that those pavers are down. but the wood is going to sit in there unevenly. You're going to have more weight on one side or one corner than another, so it's going to shift anyway. This is really good. Going to finish boxing out the bottom of the frame then. A number of ways you can finish out the boxing of the floor. What I'm going to do is run a board on the inside of this. I want the very outside to be the full length of these boards here. So what happens is this inside board needs to get cut 3 inches shorter to allow for 1.5 inches of the width of those boards on each side, so that that board was going to sit inside of the outside, the two side boards, and then these long boards on the outside are going to be full length and uncut. So I'm just taking off approximately 3 inches off the side. One thing is good to check too is these boards are not always the same. So that board, this board, and that board might be all slightly different lengths, and I mean like 1/4 of an inch, not that much. They are all within 1/16 of an inch of each other, so I'm just going to take off 3 inches of the middle one and call it good. Otherwise, you'd want to make sure you're cutting the right amount off and not just doing 3 inches from the side, and you know, you get a little bit off because each board is slightly different length. Something else, if you have one of these speed squares, what you can do is put your pencil in at the 3 inch mark, and well, hard to do one-handed, but put it at a 3 inch mark and you just drag down, make a 3 inch line. The other way, I think a lot of people do it, is they just measure out 3 inches with a tape measure, then use the straight edge of this and mark 3 inches. This is how I'm going to box both ends. You can see this board is sitting on the inside of the two front and back boards, and then this board butts up against it. So I'll be nailing here and here, and then this way on the front and back ones. And something else I just thought of as I was cutting this is these 4x4s that this is sitting on are exactly 4 feet. This is exactly 4 feet. If I want this on the outside, that means that this is going to hang off, or that side's going to hang off. Either way, it's not going to sit on there completely. I want it to rest on there as much as possible because of the weight of the wood. I want it to transfer onto the 4x4s and then onto the pavers. So what I'm going to do is cut this one just a little bit shorter so that the ends of these boards can rest completely on the 4x4s, and I don't have to worry about the nails on the end here providing all the shear strength. Of course, this middle board is going to be supporting most of the weight, which is good. That's on the 4x4s, and also it's going to be resting on the 4x4s on this end and over there, especially in the middle. But I want to make sure that all of the runners are fully supported and nothing is kind of hanging off. It's not a big deal. It's just one of those things that I like to do it. I like to make sure that nails are not the only thing holding it together, because over time those nails are going to work their way loose. They're going to slowly get pulled out. Something's going to happen. If you had screws, the screws are eventually going to snap and then they're going to lose strength. You shouldn't depend on the nail or the screw providing all of the strength for your structure. Your structure should be more or less self-supporting, and all of the support should eventually work its way to the ground. The ground should be what's holding everything up, and the nails here are just holding it together. They're not actually holding these front and back boards up, which then I'm going to run more boards this way on top of these 2x6s that I will actually be setting the wood on. So I want to make sure that all of the weight of the wood gets transferred to the floor. The floor gets transferred to the 4x4s. 4x4s go to the pavers. Pavers go to the ground. All right. Now I have it set up the way I want. So you can see this board is resting on the 4x4. This board will be nailed along here. This board is resting on the 4x4. Not much, but I can always move this 4x4 inward a little bit to give it more rest. It doesn't need to have this much room on the outside, but then I'll nail it here. Same with this one, I'll nail over here along this way, and this 4x4 is resting on there. Same thing with over there. So now it's ready to start nailing together. Double check that it's square. Just take your square to each corner, do a measure in an X pattern or something, and then you can nail it together. Something that helps is to mark exactly where you're going to nail this board. I have it marked so that I put the board right between the two marks here where the X is, and then I can nail down. It helps when you don't have, like this is pretty obvious, you just line them up and make them even and you nail. But when it's in the middle here, it helps to actually have a guide. You can always put a line in the middle too and line up the center of the board, but I like doing the two sides. That way you know it's right where you want it. A note about the nails to use. It doesn't really matter what type or size or length, as long as you're using the right ones for whatever you're doing. This is treated wood. You can see it says cedar tone premium here. It's treated wood. All of this is cedar tone treated. And so if you use ordinary nails in here, it's going to rust. You want to use hot dip galvanized exterior grade nails, and that's what these are, so that way they don't rust and they'll last a heck of a lot longer. If you used ordinary nails, they would rust in here, inside, somewhere, to the point of not being effective, and eventually it would just fall apart a lot sooner than using galvanized. So you want to make sure if you're using treated wood, use galvanized nails. If you're using ordinary pine, it doesn't matter quite as much. I would probably still use exterior galvanized nails just because this is out in the elements and it's sitting in the rain and stuff, but definitely if it's treated wood, need galvanized nails. One final touch before putting the top boards on is just putting a nail at the end of each of these so that you can see them there and in the center, so that it stays on the 4x4s, that there's no shifting over time and it just stays where it's supposed to. It's much less likely to start shifting one way or another with the winters and the hot and cold cycles and stuff. I don't think it would go anywhere when there's all that weight on it, but this just helps keep it in one spot, and all it needs is one nail. To keep in mind when you're working with treated wood, wear gloves. Probably isn't going to hurt you if you're doing it once or twice, but in the long run, if you're handling treated wood all the time with your bare hands, probably isn't good for you. All the floorboards are rough cut. I just set them there for now. I'm going to measure out exactly where each of them goes. Just like I did in the center board, I measured out on the end and put 2 marks. I'll make a mark where each of these is going to go and nail it down so they're spaced evenly, and it just looks better than throwing them down like they are now. Got all the floorboards on there now. I put these on first instead of putting the posts on the side. Even the posts, what I'm going to do, are on the outside. They're just going to rest or nail into the side 2x6s here. I wanted to get these down just because it's easier and you can nail them down a little bit faster. This is the only spot over here where I didn't have enough room to put another gap, so I just doubled up the boards, which is fine. Prevents me from having to throw one board away anyway. So I did a interval center on center. This is 5 inches and makes a nice gap. It's not too wide that all the logs are going to fall between, or like small branches and brush, but it's wide enough that I think it'll be plenty for air circulation. I have 8 boards left. These will become the posts. I'm going to use 2 on each corner, and I'm going to basically make an L out of it and stack them like this, and then I'll nail them to the corner. And you'll see why I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that so I have something to nail to for the roof. So I just nailed the posts to the outside, and they're in this L that I said I was going to make, so that they meet up in the corner like that. Something simple. The weight of the posts are not supporting the weight of the wood, they're just supporting the roof really, and the sides, which are going to just be 1x8s. And on this side I just rested it on the ground. You can see that the 4x4 has some gap there, and this is just resting on the ground. On the other side it has a lot bigger gap because the ground is lower, sloped, and then I just brought this down about the same amount, so the top of the posts are roughly the same height. And there's all 4 posts nailed to the 2x4s, 2x6s I mean, and the 4x4 posts on the bottom. And it's roughly, these boards in the front are 8 feet long, but with the thickness of the 4x4, the 2x6, and then the 2x4 sitting on there, it's roughly 7 feet if you're standing on the platform in the front, and in the back it's about 6 feet. I made it a foot shorter so that there's a slope just for snow and rain and whatnot. A foot might be a little bit much. It could have been like 6 inches. It really could have even just been flat, but I like to have a little bit of a slope. So now this is how I'm putting the sides on. I measured an 11-inch space on center. And then I just put a single screw or in each one here. And the reason I did that is I would like to be able to replace these. These are not treated, obviously, that's just plain pine. And I'd like to be able to replace the sides easy if I can, and a single screw allows me to do that. Or if they start to fall apart and I don't want to replace them yet, I can just put another screw in. Whereas a nail might be a little bit more work. You pick whichever one you want. I happen to have screws that were the right size so the nail wouldn't protrude out the back. So there's no screw showing. If I were to use the same nails that I was using for right here, these galvanized ones, they're too long. They would be sticking out, and I didn't want that. So I went with the screws that I had, and also makes it easy to replace them in the future. For the backboards, that will go on the back side. I just cut them 1.5 inches short because these are 1x8s, so 3/4 of an inch thick times 2, you get 1.5 inches, so cut off 1.5 inches. That way you have room for the thickness that you added with the sideboards right here. You can account for that on the back side because the boards are going to match up to the same spots. So once those are up, the sides are done, you just do the roof. So when you put these up, put the side boards on the short post first. So this is the long post, this is the short post because part of the thickness is taken up by this. Reason for that is these will have as much as they can to screw into, and then this side has plenty to spare with the thickness of this, so it's better to put these sides on first on the short posts, then the long side. If you switch this around so your long side is over here and your short side is here, you'd put the back on first and then you'd put this on. Sides are all on. It's ready for the roof. That's what these two pieces over here are for. Basically just going to make a box for the top, just going around the outside, and then we can put some metal paneling on the roof, and then it'll be complete. So I'd like to cut an angle on this so that it sits flush and I have as much engagement on the wood as possible. Basically just held this up and then marked it, and did that on both sides. Now I'm going to have to compensate for this mark being over there on the other side, because the other side is not going to take into account the gap I had. And here's the angle that you get when you trace it. So on that side you get an angle that's mostly flush. I cut a little bit of slack, and then on this side as well, so you get enough room to put 2 nails in it. And I raised it above the top here just a little bit so that when the roof comes down, it doesn't hit this and then have a weird like flat spot. It just continues the angle. It's maybe a little bit high, but that's okay. And then we'll have another board that butts up right here, goes across from this side to the other side on both the front and the back, and then we can put the metal roof on. There's the boxed in roof. Really there's nothing special about it. Just getting the angles on the one board, and then the other boards are just straight across. And then once you have that box, you can go ahead and put your roofing metal on, or whatever you want, plywood or whatever you want. The nice thing about boxing it like this, especially with the 4x8 dimensions, is you can just put a piece of plywood on top and shingle it if you want, or do metal. I'm going to do metal just because it's a lot faster. You can also put a couple braces in here to support the metal a little bit better. I'm not going to do that just yet. I probably will come winter when the snow is on it and it gets heavy. But for now, I'm just going to put the perimeter box on there and then set the metal on top and screw it down on the perimeter. And there's the first panel. It works out to being 3 panels wide with roughly a 6-inch overlap all the way around. Or not overlap, overhang. So that way the drip from rain and snow and stuff will actually miss falling onto the footings or the floor or anything on here. So, and now it's done. I messed up a little bit on the measurement of the overhang so that this side is got a couple more inches than that side, but overall I think it looks good. Should be able to hold quite a bit of wood. I measured out that it should be like 1.5, 1 3/4. If I stacked it to the very roof, it would maybe get close to 2, but really 1.5 cords of wood is plenty for my needs. So I added some eye loops, eye hooks, and bungee cords down at the corners just to hold the tarp on the front. Mainly to just keep extra rain and snow out of there so it's not blowing in. But I think that kind of completes it, and then it's done. I can go ahead and fill it up with wood. And that's the final product.